Because it matters. Sustainability in the building and construction industry is paramount. It ensures that we can meet our present needs without compromising the ability of future generations to meet theirs. How sustainable practices are transforming the way we plan, build, and operate structures. We share insights on eco-friendly design principles and the importance of sustainability certifications. Let's explore the world of safe, secure, and seamless access solutions together with our host, Wilma Werner.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Because It Matters, the podcast where we open the doors to innovation, merge aesthetic with function and security with elegance. On today's episode, I welcome three guests, Stephanie Ossenbach, Lea Rammelmann, and Aurore Christolomme. Welcome, ladies. Great to have you here.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Very much looking forward to talking to you today. Our today's topic is sustainable architecture, from design to demolition. And ladies, please tell us, why are you here and why are you the expert when it comes to today's topic?
My name is Stephanie Ossenbach. I am responsible for sustainability at dormakaba. For the company on a company level. So I think that we are always plugged into whatever our customers are asking for, and ultimately one of the main stakeholders are architects. I think we have a good understanding of what architects' needs are in the space of sustainable architecture.
I'm Lea Rammelmann, and I'm the counterpart of Stephanie for product sustainability. So I'm located in product development, and with this we make sure that we not only have sustainability anchored on company level, but also for product sustainability in terms of new product developments and also existing products.
My name is Aurore Christolomme. I work on the topic of specification, which means we help and support architects in the planning phases of the construction and renovation projects. And sustainability is definitely a very, very important topic now. So I'm very glad to be here today.
Thank you, ladies. So for our guests to have the chance to get to know the three of you a bit more, please tell us, how does sustainability accompany you in your private life? Like, do you have a special eye for sustainability? What do you do in order to be sustainable in your private life?
I think there's so many things that defy my sustainability commitment in my personal life. I drive a fully electric car, and if I do fly in the rare occasions, because I have quite a lot of family very far away, I compensate my flights, and obviously I'm always looking to buy food in the grocery stores that is more sustainable, bio-based kind of food, and always looking at the labels if it's Marine Stewardship Council. So I think there's so many different ways in how we shop and how we transport ourselves that can define how sustainable and how low your personal carbon footprint is.
So in today's episode, our guests not only have the chance to learn about sustainability in the construction industry, but also what they can implement in their private lives. Lea and Aurore, how do you implement sustainability in your private lives?
I don't have an e-car, but I do the same as Stephanie. So like offsetting my flights if I fly somewhere, then I'm looking, if I go shopping, then like Steph, is it bio-based, I look at the labels and stuff. And I'm also really picky about waste separation. So like plastic to plastic, paper to paper, and these kind of things, yeah.
Yeah, my Germanness is loves that answer. Thank you.
Yes, and same for me. In France, we about the waste, we do also have different bins for different products, and we in my area, the recycling factory create some games for the children to learn and to know a bit
really?
more on, and to educate the children. And the children love to play and to learn, and it's a very interesting way to start doing it, and as a reflex, like you don't even have to think, you just know it's like this. So yeah, I like this.
How do they do that? I mean, starting off very young, that's a good idea. How do they do that?
They place on the beans, they place like you have to shoot like as if it was a basketball, and so they, by doing this as a game, then they can also explain more in details. Okay, in the blue one you should only use this type of products. In the yellow bean you should use that type of products, and through the game they pass the messages. And my daughter, she's 4 years old, and she loves that.
And she already knows how to handle trash properly.
Yes, she tries, but she
Love
knows
that.
it is useful, and she does it. Yeah.
So it's the gamification aspect also with the sustainability. And if there was a topic, let's dive a little bit deeper into you as private life people. If we called you for your private life expertise, because you are an expert in some designated area, what topic would we probably call you for?
You can call me for cooking tips and advices. Maybe you don't need, but if you want, you can.
So, Aurore, the expert when it comes to cooking and advice.
Me, maybe if it comes to yoga. I like doing yoga and all sorts of yoga. So aerial yoga, hatha yoga. So yeah.
So, for how long have you been doing that?
Several years now. I cannot recall, to be honest.
That's like I started when I was 4.
No, not so long. Not so long.
But Lea is also a big fan of aerial yoga, which is a totally different level of yoga. She likes to fly around in the fitness studio.
It sounds like Stefanie's into yoga as well.
I do enjoy yoga. I think it's important in terms of personal sustainability to recharge my batteries. I think it's for me a big meditative and stress reliever. So I do enjoy doing that. But I think I enjoy even more as I'm based in Switzerland, taking advantage of the nature here and enjoying the forests and going on hikes with the family.
I get that. I know that any person from Switzerland, everyone loves nature, everyone is into hiking, and everyone, of course, loves the mountains. And I understand, I get the point. Thank you very much, ladies.
Introduction into Sustainable Architecture.
Ladies, we have met here to talk about sustainable architecture. And Stefanie, I'd love to kick it off with you. From your perspective, what makes architecture sustainable architecture? And what are the biggest differences between traditional and sustainable architecture?
Sure. I think it's really about the design philosophy at the end of the day. Traditional architecture, you focus a lot on the aesthetics, like maybe the culture of the place where the building is being constructed and the history of that place. It doesn't necessarily take into account the environmental impact of that particular building or infrastructure. But sustainable architecture looks at the whole picture. It doesn't only look at how nice a building is, but also what kind of materials are being used, what kind of resources are being used, what's the energy efficiency of the building. Is there a way to make the building have a longer life? So it really takes this whole life cycle perspective of the building. And it's not only about having a nice design.
And when you think of a specific building when it comes to sustainable architecture, what is your favorite building on this planet so far that you've seen?
Oh, that's quite difficult. I think there's so many. My favorite ones are definitely the ones that use a lot of wood in the structure, like full wood buildings. I think that's quite a big trend coming now, and I know it's very difficult from the structural perspective to always make it work, and you need to work with highly skilled kind of, I would even call them handy crafts people. So they really are quite advanced in working with wood, but I really like this trend.
And Aurore and Lea, do you have kind of a specific favorite building when it comes to sustainable architecture?
Yes, I love the building in Singapore, which is often used as cover picture on different like presentations. It's the one with all the greens, so with the trees and all the plants. It's a hotel in Singapore, which is often used to show how sustainable an building can be.
And for me, there's one building, one project I had followed. I cannot give a lot of details on the building itself, but I really liked the concept which was used. So it was a marine biological research center next to the sea. The building was adapting to where it was built, so that the building is you use just the sufficient resources and you have less impact. So you really take advantage of everything around. And I really liked the concept. I think it was in Tahiti or something. So I have to check where it is exactly, but I really enjoyed the story, and it was very well executed, I think. That was interesting for me.
And it sounds lovely. That sounds lovely. So everyone listening, if you don't know yet that building, look it up. Sounds like a fantastic concept, especially since the construction industry is considered to be a major contributor to the global CO2 emissions. Stefanie, how can sustainable practices mitigate this impact?
Well, I think we have to look at the source in the first place to understand how it can be mitigated. And obviously, when you think of large building constructions or skyscrapers, where and all the mega cities around the world, the main material that's being used is cement and steel, and those are highly energy intensive. In the production of them, I mean, cement by itself is already responsible for about 8% of global CO2 emissions. And the whole industry is heavily reliant on that. So I think one of the best ways to mitigate the impacts is by choosing more sustainable materials. There's a lot of work being done on green steel, for example, also on substitution of cement with other cement or other materials that are as strong as cement, or even using recycled content in cement production. So I think there's a lot of innovation and drive going in this direction.
Is there a specific project that you can name with regards to that?
No, don't know the name specifically, but I know that there's been some work done on using recycled cement from Holcim. They're quite advanced in developing projects. I think some collaborations on having that, especially in developing countries, which I think is vitally important that we have the economic development in those countries also aligned to a decarbonization trajectory and pathway.
Lea, it looks like you are familiar with these sustainable projects as well. What do you know about green steel or recycled cement?
Yeah, I mean, these are the main impactors of a building, so that's why they have to fulfill a lot of regulations and requirements, not only coming from the investors or the owner of the buildings, but also from regulatory side, so from the states. And it's also not about like recycled content and recycled materials, but it's also like how the materials can be or how they can stay in the loop. So coming to the topic of circular economy, and that's what's getting more and more important, because we all know how intense it is to produce like these kind of materials Stephanie has just mentioned. And with keeping them in the loop, it's about not only reducing CO2, but also becoming aware or help like to keep like sources, like resources, like steel or whatsoever. So to not produce them all primary, but also like keep them in the loop.
And this is true at the level of the resources, the materials. Yes, we try to recycle, reuse as much as possible, and this is something everyone is trying to do much more and more at the level of the products also, but even at the level of the projects. The new, whenever there's a need for a renovation, there's always this aspect of, okay, what are the elements of the structure or of the buildings that we can keep instead of systematically destroy everything. And this is a topic which is very important for the architects. Of course, there's always this aspect of cost, how much it costs to destroy everything and start again, or reuse some elements. But more than the cost now, there is really this will to try and keep as much as possible. So, of course, you need to check very much the solidity of the structure. But it's really something that the architects we've been discussing with, also with Stefanie, they really have that more and more in their head and even in their heart. This is kind of a new. It was an existing value, but it's more and more important in the projects today.
And if you have a conversation with somebody who's not yet on the side of or hasn't heard much about sustainable architecture, what would you tell them are the key benefits of adopting sustainable architecture practices?
I think in conversations that I've had with architects, especially in Germany, they tell me that now going for a green building certification, for example, from the German green building um, uh, um, standards, that and they grade the sustainability of the building bronze, silver, gold, platinum levels, and they really do believe that now going for a gold is actually quite daily business. It's nothing special anymore. Now the only thing that's really considered a differentiator is going to platinum. And this helps them at the end of the day to actually find people who want to rent space within those buildings, within those projects. So I think there's a clear business case behind building in this way, but in and of itself, just having a sustainable architecture practices involved, besides the market value and the reputational aspects of it. You also can have a more of an assurance that you have all the boxes checked and ticked for making sure that you're meeting your regulatory compliance requirements. Everything is above board. But beyond that, I think it's also a value system. As Aurora was mentioning, it's ensuring that at the end of the day, when the build is complete, you have maybe improved indoor air quality because the materials that you've selected are non-toxic or low emission materials, or that the people there just feel better being in the building because there's more natural light and there's better, health. The health aspects for the occupants are better, or simply lowering the utility bills for the building occupants by enhancing energy efficiency. So there's just so many benefits to it that I think at the end of the day, the cost benefit and the return on investment is clearly there. And it's very compelling for the future of building design.
That reminds me of a conversation that I had when I was attending a contest, and it was about sustainable architecture. And we had international students, teams from all over the world taking part in that contest. And there I got in touch with the life cycle approach in sustainable architecture. Thank you, ladies.
The life cycle approach in sustainable architecture.
So when we think of the first phase, the design phase, Lea, how important is it to incorporate sustainable practices from the design phase of a building?
It's really important because in the design phase, it's about the vision of the building. So what are the visions of the project owner or whoever is responsible for that building? So is it supposed to be, I don't know, a LEED building or DGNB, to which we will come later anyway? But in this phase, it's about getting the holistic approach. So what I want to achieve in terms of sustainable, like what kind of materials do I want to use? And in this phase, it's already about the specification. So the owner decides like what the building should achieve in terms of sustainability, like only reusing recycled concrete, for example, or recycled steel or carbon neutral steel. And that's why it's so important, because it's the basis for the sustainable building.
If I can add something to what you explained, Lea, as the project advances in the planning, first, yes, you decide on the type of certification and the material, so quite high level, but even at the end of the planification, you need to go much more in the details. And in our case, for example, for sliding doors, even in the planning phase, you can decide, okay, do you want a single or double leaves sliding door? Do you want a single glass or double glass or even triple glazing now? And this has a strong impact on when your building will be in operation, the type of the air and especially the temperature difference. So the air that can come inside the building or outside of the building, this is something that you can even plan at a very early stage. So, and this is why we try and support as best as we can the architects and planners at a very early stage, so that they can evaluate the difference and the impact in their building and in their construction.
In the planning phase already.
Yes.
Thank you. And Stefanie, if you take us to the construction phase now, what would you say, what sustainable methods can be implemented during the construction phase to minimize the environmental impact?
Thank you, Wilma. I think that's a really important question that often gets forgotten, to be honest. I think people think really only of what's left after the construction, but even during the construction, and this can take years, and the scale of some construction projects is massive with hundreds of people working on site. So there's a lot of steps that construction companies and builders can take during that phase of the life cycle. It can be very simple things, just like taking into account how to control the soil erosion during digging, and to manage stormwater runoff, and how to preserve the existing vegetation and natural habitats that are surrounding the building location, so that you leave it as undisturbed as possible. So that's just actually from the physical space, but then there's the actual management of the construction, like choosing more energy efficient machinery, and making sure that if there's waste on site, for example, a lot of the construction materials, the products, the components that are being installed, and the packaging that they come to the construction site already wrapped around. Like, what do you do with all that massive amount of plastic? And making sure that there's a proper recycling and reuse system. In the best case, you have really a collaboration with the provider to take back that packaging. And I think, yeah, that's kind of like from a physical space, but you also need to bear in mind the social aspects of sustainability, like making sure that the construction workers themselves are taking the trainings that are required to ensure health and safety, during the construction. It is vital to make sure that there's no accidents during the construction phase as well. And I consider that as one of the pillars of sustainability.
So a lot of details that one might not be thinking of initially when you think of sustainable architecture, especially when it comes to the construction phase. Thank you for that insight. And if we move on in the process and come to the operation phase, Aurore, what would you say? How can smart building technologies and regular maintenance contribute to a building's sustainability during that phase?
So for me, the sustainability of the building, if we take both aspects, like people feeling well and comfortable in the building, which is one important place also of getting a better life and future. So it's not only environment. So on this aspect, you want the people to feel well in the building, and smart buildings, connected building can help you get more informations on how is the building doing, let's say, like a monitoring, or are there any issues or anything which is not optimal, and then you can take decisions based on these informations, and sometimes you can even act remotely. So that's one of the aspects. And of course the other one is to take a better care of the devices. So when you know the informations, then you can service them in a more optimal way, just a sufficient level of service to make it last longer. So of course you want every part of the building to last for a very long time, so that you don't have to build again, or for both aspects, the cost, but also really the impact on the planet. So I would my answer would be these two aspects: the well-being of the people and the longer life of everything in the building.
And the well-being of the building itself.
Exactly.
And in order to keep that up, sometimes there probably are renovations necessary, maybe some upgrades even. So, Lea, what would you recommend? What are the best practices for sustainable renovations? If, for example, if you think of the hotel that you just told us about in Indonesia, and they were asking you to renovate and upgrade their space, what are the best practices?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people think then in the renovation phase there's not much to do, but of course there is. Like the environmental performance can totally be new of the building, and like what Aurora says, the well-being of the inhabitants can be increased. And of course, it's about operating costs. But if I come again to the topic of circular economy, so it's about like, can I reuse some of the materials which are going to be de-installed, for example? Is there any chance to reuse the flooring, the walls, or the ceilings, for example? And what can I do with that afterwards? If I cannot use it for the building itself, can I use it for something different? Or can I use reused materials from another building, for example, so to keep everything in the loop? But of course, if I want to upgrade like my building, then of course I have to think of the topics of energy efficiency. Like, for example, can I upgrade with any technology with which I can improve the energy performance of my building? Can I control it somehow? So there are a lot of, for example, Dormakaba products which you can use here, which we will come to later anyway.
And when a building then has to be demolished, Stefanie, what would you say? How is it possible to minimize the demolition waste and the environmental damage?
Yeah, I mean that can be 50 years into the future, right? So everything, all the renovations that have led up to that will help already at that end phase to reduce the waste. So it's what Lea has been saying is completely vital to actually even giving you a chance of success at the very end. But I think it's about being very selective between what you consider waste to begin with. I think that there's a lot of salvaging that can be done, a lot of urban mining that can be done, just to decrease the volume of the debris that's sent to landfill. You can reuse bricks and lumber and metal, and I think there's very interesting kinds of examples of the direction that innovation in construction is heading, with a focus on demolition. I mean, there's a really great example in Germany of a marketplace online called Conkuler, where you can actually buy bricks from old construction sites that have, from old buildings that have been demolished. So it's really building a value for these materials, and kind of forcing companies to look at material recovery in a different light, because there's value there to be had, and it's currently really underestimated. That's on the material side, but actually also just very simple things during the deconstruction, even things like thinking about noise pollution. How you schedule the demolition work so that it's less disruptive for the community, how to kind of reduce the dust and the air particles, and the pollutants in the air for the neighborhood, and how to make sure that there's noise barriers. So there's quite a lot that should be taken into account, also in terms of community considerations.
Stephanie, what you mentioned regarding the reuse of materials in the renovation, we also saw one example of reusing the materials in the renovation, for example, of the Wilmina Hotel in Berlin. So it was a prison initially, and they completely changed the purpose of the building, and now it's a very high-end hotel. And so they transform completely the building to give it a new life, a new purpose, and to really make the atmosphere nice. So that was a big challenge, and they did a wonderful job. And so just one small example. So a lot of stuff were done in a very sustainable way, but one just small detail which I liked very much is when they had to, of course, destroy some of the walls, because there were too many walls, and to open up the spaces. The material used was so nice and beautiful. The bricks, old bricks of this old building, they could reuse in some other parts of the building. So they kind of displaced the material from one place to another place, and they managed to keep the quality material and to reuse. And they did a wonderful job. If you have a chance to check out the project, it's very beautiful. Well done.
From your experiences, are demolition companies, generally open to that discussion, or do you need to put in some more conviction work?
Yes. Yes, because it's about like if a building is destroyed, it's about how can everything be separate, like in general. It's not about can I get different products out of the building. We are not there yet, but we are currently on the edge, in my point of view. So there has to be a lot of information sharing and stuff, and how everybody can benefit from that. I think that has to be made clear in order to make sure that the structure of these demolition processes for buildings will change in the future.
And maybe one of the pro arguments could be different sustainability certifications and how they get more and more important in the future. Thank you, ladies.
Sustainability certifications and their importance.
So maybe the sustainability certifications may be an argument. And Lea, I know that you are an expert on this topic. Can you please explain to us the difference between the three most important ones, the LEED, the BREEAM, and the WELL certifications?
Yes, so maybe I start with the explanation what it means. So lead means leadership in energy and environmental design. So you hear directly what it's about. Then BREEAM is Building Research Establishment Environmental Assessment Methodology. So that's really tough to say, but it's again about environmental, and well is like about well, so really well-being. And maybe the names already tell where the differences are in. So LEED and BREEAM are more about the environmental or the environmental performance of the buildings, and well is really about the human health and wellness of the building, so to the inhabitants. And that's where they differ. And LEED and well, they are both have their origin in North America. So well, for example, is coming from California, and BREEAM is the Great Britain system. But LEED and BREEAM are focusing on the environmental performance of the buildings, and well is really about the human health and the well-being of the building to the inhabitants.
And LEED is originated in
North America as well.
Okay.
But I cannot tell you like it's not coming from California, but well specifically is coming from California, because California really is, as you may know, like a really sustainable part of the US, and they really have a lot of regulations and coming up with a lot of requirements in terms of building. So that's where this is coming from.
Okay, and let's have a close look at the LEED certification first. What are the key categories and the criteria for achieving that certification?
Yeah, that's really, really tough to go through all of them, and probably a bit boring, but maybe I focus on materials. Yeah, I focus on materials in that regard. So as the name already says, it's leadership in energy and environmental design. So it's about the energy performance of the building and the environmental performance of the building. So for example, if I look into the material topic, and maybe I can do that for the two after that as well, so to see the differences and the identities. So if I look into the materials of LEED, then it's about indoor air quality and low emitting materials, for example, and material reuse, the recycling, and of course, the responsible sourcing of raw materials. So for example, if we get a request for a LEED building, and that's really important. So because we get a lot of requests like, hey, I need a LEED certified product, which is not existing. So we as building product manufacturer can always support the building and to achieve the green building certification system. Then, for example, we provide environmental product declarations, which are giving information about the environmental performance of our products along the life cycle.
And what are the greenest, the most sustainable material to use?
Actually, so LEED is not going that far at the moment. Of course, you have different stages. You have like pro, silver, gold, and platinum. Like you have a lot in the different green building certification systems, but it's about the provision of information. So what the building can achieve and how much information can be provided. Like if I come back to the EPD stuff again, then there are rating how many EPDs can be provided from the different building product manufacturers, and the more you provide, the more points you get. So it's about providing information on the different building products.
It's about collecting the points in the point system.
Exactly. It's about collecting points, yeah.
And the benefits of, if I can add, the benefits of having all of these EPDs, it's a standard format. So people can choose in a more informed way the products that they will use. So you get the points to have the document, but then the people, once they have the documents, they compare and they choose the most, the product which will use less energy, which will last much longer, stuff like that. So once you have the document and the data, then you can have a more informed decision. It's not only the cost, or so in the past we had fact sheets. We still have the product fact sheets, but when the format is not a standard on the market, it's much more complex to compare. So now with EPDs, it gets, in the sense of sustainability, it's a standard, so it's much better for the customers.
Yeah, got it. So it gives a huge advantage with regards to transparency in the building process. Got it. And can you please tell us what does EPD stand for?
Yeah, so EPD is short for Environmental Product Declaration. And like I mentioned before, it's giving information or transparent information about the environmental performance. Like, for example, it's giving you the CO2 value along the life cycle divided in the different stages. So how much CO2 is caused while the material is produced, the transport of the material to the manufacturer, and while the product is produced, for example.
And how does BREEAM assess environmental performance?
Yeah, so BREEAM goes a bit in the same direction as mentioned, but again, it's going too far to go to every criteria again. So I will focus on the materials part. So of course, also in BREEAM, you have different stages which you can achieve. And in terms of materials, for example, it's as in LEED, it's about the sustainable sourcing, life cycle impacts, and there I come to the EPD topic again, and material efficiency, so recycled content, for example. And this is what they are looking into. So how the materials can influence like the building and the environmental performance overall of the building.
And in contrast to that, you just told us that the WELL certification focuses on the well-being of the people involved in the whole process. What are the criteria of that certification?
Yeah, this certification is pretty new, not pretty new, but pretty new to us, I would say, because it's getting more and more popular. For example, like if a California architect is building a building, let's say in Germany or somewhere else in Europe, then of course they take up what they learned in their market. That's why it's getting more and more popular at the moment. And it's really about the well-being of the inhabitants and how the building can influence like the human health. So it has different criteria like air, water, light, for example. So how can the lighting of the building be improved, thermal comfort, but also as in LEED and BREEAM, it's about materials. But in this regard, it's about non-toxic materials. So can they harm the health of the inhabitants, or does they exposure any hazardous substances while they are installed? So for example, if a carpet is glued to the floor, then so-called volatile organic compounds are coming up. So you know that if you come into a building and there's a funny smell because the building is pretty new, it's coming, for example, from the glue of the carpet or the painting on the wall. And this is what they try to measure. Like, does that harm the health of the inhabitants of the building?
Well, it's like when you get into a new car and you still smell
exactly
the newness of it. Got it.
Yeah.
And do you have a project that was built in Europe that you are a fan of with regards to the WELL certification?
As I mentioned, it's pretty new. So at the moment, I don't have a current example, to be honest. But I get a lot of feedback from the markets that investors or project owners are thinking about implementing the WELL standard. But for now, I don't have a current example, unfortunately.
What do you think? How long will it take until the WELL certification standard will be standard in Europe as well?
It's tough to estimate, but I think it will not take too much time anymore because you can see it's the same as the progress in sustainability. Like people were in the beginning looking only on the environmental part of sustainability and the economical part, and now they're getting more and more into the social part. And this is also what I see is happening with this WELL standard, as this is covering, in my point of view, the social part. So they not only want to have buildings which are sustainable in the environmental sense, but they also want to have buildings which are social sustainable. And that's what I think is there's a clear gap, which I think in the LEED and BREEAM system. That's why WELL has established, because they were saying that this is not well covered in the two systems, although they are covering it, but just scratching on the surface. And WELL is just really about only the health. So yeah, I think it will become more and more, and maybe in the next 5 years, I would assume it's getting more and more popular. My wish, of course, would be that they all combine and that there will only be one green building certification system. That would be awesome,
Yes,
but
that
that's
would
wishful
reduce the
thinking.
complexity as well. Thank
Yeah.
you very much.
Planning and designing sustainable buildings.
So when it comes to sustainability, we have different aspects that are also they can also be certified when it comes to material, when it comes to the health of the people involved. Stefanie, when it comes to selecting sustainable materials in site locations, what are your recommendations about the factors that architects and planners should consider?
I think there's quite a lot that they need to consider. Yeah, and I think I completely feel for architects of today, because I think they have so many requirements that they have to bear in mind. But I think in terms of the materials, it's really about the embedded carbon within those materials. Like, if you don't have a life cycle assessment done of the materials that you're selecting, then you really cannot have a positive impact. That's like, the very first, what gets measured gets managed. I mean, this is a cliche, but it's a cliche for a reason. And if you actually look at the entire life cycle of a building, and you look at, everyone focuses on the energy consumption during the operation and the CO2 emissions that are inherent in that. But really, the 70% of the entire impact is actually captured in the materials that are being chosen. So we talked a lot about recycled steel or green steel and recycled concrete, and that's for a reason, because they really, really do matter. But it can also be in smaller things, like choosing materials that are renewable, sustainably harvested materials like bamboo that are quickly regenerated. And Lea mentioned under the WELL standard all the topic on low volatile organic compounds and avoiding harmful chemicals. So all of those things really need to be looked at in the design phase before you get locked in to material selection that you really then don't have very much wiggle room if you don't look at it during the very beginning phases of the project. And when we look at site location, I would have to say, yeah, you can look at orientation, like where is the placement of the sun, or where is the curve of the sun hitting the building, so you can optimize how you're using natural light, how you can maximize suitability for installing solar panels. So working within the space of the location. Avoiding sensitive sites where there could be threatened species. I mean, anyway, there's so many requirements in terms of environmental impact assessments for constructions. I think this one there's already very high awareness of, but it can also be things just like how do you how do you link to the community around you? Is there a good public transport link? What kind of existing infrastructure is there, and amenities, so that it's a more livable space? Is it walkable? Is it bikeable? I think all those kinds of topics are also tend to be neglected, and I think should be more in the focus.
You already answered one of the questions that I have when it comes to building orientation, about the usage of daylight, the angle of sunlight hitting the roof, so you could make use of PV on your roof. So a lot to consider. And I was just thrown back and flashed back to when I was 15. I did an internship with an architect, and I do not remember him considering any of the topics that we've
For
been talking
shame.
about today. But that was admitting that's quite a few winters ago. I have to mention. 15 is quite a few winters ago. And I'm wondering, if you use like locally sourced material and low impact production material. What would you say, what are the benefits of using them?
The benefits of that are definitely that the transport distances are not too long, so that you have short transport distances. And of course, that you can say, or low impact production materials, like for example, this all links together because often we have like discussions coming back to the green building certification systems. You get points if the materials are sourced locally, which means like in a distance of 800 kilometers. But in a global world with a lot of globalization, it's sometimes really tough. If it's not about wood, then it's tough to cover that. Because if you get like, or if you have like production in Asia and the material or the product is used in Asia, then you of course fulfill this. But if the product is then sold and installed in Europe, then of course you cannot fulfill this. So it's always depending of where you are. And at this point, the production of the product is so important. If that is, let me say, CO2 neutral or really sustainable, then of course you still have the transport distances no matter where you sell it and install it. But at least you have the part sustainable where it's produced, because like getting all the materials from where they are locally sourced and installing them there is really, really, for the most of the time, not possible at all. That's why a low impact production is really important of the materials, because with this you can at least say no matter where it's installed or the material or the product is installed, then it used you the part which can be influenced is already done.
Can you give an example of low impact materials?
For example, reused and recycled materials, for instance, like steel. Recycled steel, 100% recycled steel, of course, has a low impact.
Is any steel recyclable?
Depends. The answer is always depends. Depending on, of course, sometimes you cannot like use recycled steel because of certain requirements and like security reason, fire resistant reasons whatsoever. But most of the time you can, of course.
But if I can add something to this, because I really think that if you're talking about low impact, I think the number one kind of lever that we have as Dormakaba as a manufacturer is really in making sure that our plants and our manufacturing sites are sourcing green electricity, because then they can produce carbon neutrally. And Lea mentioned this, but I just really would like to emphasize how important that is as a contribution. Is this entire switch to renewables? We have recently launched solar installations in 3 of our major plants in Asia, because there you cannot find on the market necessarily enough solar or wind power. And they're kind of locked in still into the coal and other fossil fuel based energy sources. So there we have now just launched beginning of this year solar production and become self-sufficient in a lot of cases for a certain percentage of our entire energy consumption. We have 21,000 panels that are working for us, and these are some of our major production sites, and that makes a huge impact. At the end of the day, if you consider how many door closures are being produced or how many locks are being produced at those locations. So this is really, for me, the biggest contribution that many people can have is to go with these renewable energy sources.
So we have different energy sources. We also have potential to be energy efficient and sustainable during the operation phase with entry works. Aurore, can you please take us a bit deeper into it? What role does entry works play in managing energy?
So it relates very much to to the elements I mentioned earlier. So sorry if it's a repetition. It's so EntryWorks includes quite a lot of different elements. And the point of EntryWorks is to support the projects the buildings throughout the full life cycle of the building. So from the planification of the building or construction or renovation. So from the planification through the operation, the installation phase, and then the operational phase. So EntryWorks covers all phases of the building life, if I can say. So how does it optimize in the sense of sustainability? It does bring a lot of data. So it optimizes the flow of data between all stages. And when the data flows nicely in a digital way, it does mean less maybe physical transfers, less like when you have all the data, you don't need to send a technician with his car all the time. You know already in your system, you know what's happening, when it's happening. So if, for example, you don't go once, oh, I don't have the correct spare part in my truck, I have to go back another time. So it just optimizes every step. And the contribution, the sustainable contribution from EntryWorks is that you can maximize with the use of data in every stage of the building life.
I imagine in order to get to that data that you've just talked about, you need where does the data come from? For example, from Motion IQ, which is an advanced sensor system. Lea, how does this, all the technology that we have and all the data and all the advanced sensor systems, how does that enhance user experience?
Yeah, so just coming to the Motion IQ part, of course, this it's like a whole system. So the Motion IQ working together with our sliding door operator, so they are somehow in alliance. And most of us know it if you pass by a sliding door, for example, of a, I don't know, drugstore whatsoever. The door is opening, although you don't want to go through that door. So with this, you're opening the door and the air is exchanging. So in the winter, of course, the cold gets inside, the warm air gets outside, and vice versa when it's summer, of course. And with this system, so the Motion IQ in combination with that swing door operator, we want to avoid. So basically that the door is only opening if you really want to approach and walk through that door. So that the door is looking, or not really, the sensor is getting like, do you want to go through or don't you want to go through, and what kind of speed do you have? So the opening is adapting to your walking, let's say. Are you like a grandma, which is really, really walking really slow? Or if you are like a really fast walker, the door is opening quicker and closing quicker. And of course, this is then adapting to, like I mentioned, the example of the grandma. And then this is helping the building to, of course, reduce like energy costs, because if the door is not opening as much as before, then of course less energy needs to be used in order to cool the air or to make the air warmer inside the buildings. And of course this is also an experience for the users, because we had that example that people are walking towards it and they're like, oh my God, the door is not opening. But of course the door is opening, but people have to get to use this kind of new technology to understand, okay, the sensor or the door is just adapting to me as person and opening, but at a later stage.
And Lea, since you are obviously a huge fan of Motion IQ, I would like to ask you about the door efficiency calculator. How can tools like these help architects and planners enhance the energy efficiency of their designs?
Yeah, so the door efficiency calculator, not that I'm biased, but is really an awesome tool to help architects and planners to see like which door solution is the best for the different building. So it's comparing like, for example, revolving doors, sliding doors, and swing doors, and comparing like in terms of the different like prerequisites, like for example, is it like a grocery store, is it like a hotel, is it an office building, where is the building built, like is it somewhere in Spain or is it in Scandinavia. So this all incorporating, it's comparing like what is the most sustainable solution in terms of energy loss, in terms of CO2 footprint, but also of course in terms of economical reason, like where do I say, with which solution do I save money in terms of investment and life cycle costs over the lifetime of the building. So this is giving a good hint on which is the best alternative door solution for the different buildings. And of course, this is helping like the architects showing their climate strategy or CO2 reduction strategy for the different buildings. It's not a big topic right now because it's most of the time about the CO2 of the building itself. But with this, you can go a step ahead and already show in the beginning, like what can be avoided in the future if I use this door solution, for example, based on a good tool like the door efficiency calculator.
What would you say from your personal preferences if you had the chance to have to implement a sustainable upgrade onto all the commercial and public buildings in your city? What upgrade would it be if you could choose?
Yeah, of course, the motion IQ.
What? Well, perfect answer.
Good answer.
Oh, what would you choose if you could
Motion
choose one
IQ.
sustainable
No.
upgrade as well?
No, there's something else which I really like, which is, and people don't always know, but it's very basic. And it cannot apply to all buildings. You will understand. So, for example, in a hotel, when you choose the door that will be on your facade, you can choose a revolving door, a sliding door, swing door. It can be mechanical, it can be automatic. So yeah, you choose. Of course, there are some laws. You need to have the escape routes available for the people to escape in case of a fire, something like that. But let's say, what is the best door you can use to limit this air permeability so that the people you use less energy to cool or have a warm interior, and you just limit the transfers. The best option is the revolving doors. And the people don't always realize that the revolving door the facade is always closed. You don't have something opening, really. It's so the air transfer is just the compartment of the door, which is going from outside to inside and then going back outside. So the air transfer is very minimal. And another example, in a shopping mall, when you have an automatic sliding door, usually there is a sensor, not yet a motion IQ, but a normal sensor, let's say, which is already good. People are used to it. This is the standard. So, but what happens is in the shopping malls, you have a lot of visitors. So the door doesn't even have time to close again. So the door is kind of permanently open because people come and come and come. So in the successful shopping malls, when you have a lot of visitors, then the door is completely open all the time. So it's just like you have a hole in the facade, and this is the worst situation for the air permeability. And this is why in very important large shopping malls, you prefer to have a revolving door. So now maybe if you go shopping, you will have a look at the doors and check.
Next time I will.
Yeah. So stuff like that you don't always realize. But then when you work in this industry, you start to realize some little details like that.
I can imagine. And Aurore, if you could pick one sustainable upgrade that you could bring to all the public and commercial buildings in your city, which one would it be?
Probably in France, there is this very high trend of renovating the houses to make them to limit the exchanges of temperature between outside and inside. So you can choose the way you place your isolation. But I think this is a good move, a good step forward, and that is an interesting aspect, I believe.
And Stefanie, what about you? Which sustainable upgrade would you pick?
I think one of the coolest innovations I've seen lately are solar windows, because they're everywhere. I mean, we have so many windows in the buildings, and I know it's not about our industry in particular, access solutions, but I really think it's really cool. I see it. It's really exciting if you see a building and you know that every single window is actually capturing energy for the operation of that building. I find it really, really exciting, and I think it would really be a game changer if every building was to do this. So this would be, if I could have a magic
Your
wand,
wish
that would be
to
my
implement.
wish.
Thank you, ladies. Now we're already talking about what we would wish for. Now I'd love to dive with you into future trends in sustainable architecture.
Future trends in sustainable architecture.
Ladies, I'm interested to hear about your perspective on the future outlook. What do you think? How will sustainability and energy efficient solutions influence the future of building design and construction?
I think it's going to be such a huge factor in architecture in the future, because there's so many regulations that demand it. I mean, if you consider the EU Green Deal, I mean, there's regulations in the EU since 2020 that all new buildings need to be nearly zero energy buildings, and in 2030 that will the bar will be raised, and they will need to be zero emission buildings. So this is going to require massive investment in new technologies, in energy efficient HVAC systems, in the heating and ventilation and air conditioning systems, in smart energy management. I really think there's going to be a lot of push and progress on the area of passive design, of using natural ventilation and natural sunlight to actually improve the the indoor temperature and manage it so that you don't rely so much anymore on HVAC systems. I think these are going to be really, really critical areas, but we have touched on them already a lot. And I think for me, what's interesting is going to be this resilience. Building for resilience and adaptability, that's going to be a huge space as well, because we're going to have to start designing buildings to withstand extreme weather. We've seen, in Germany, recent floods and flash floods, and these things are going to continue. And I really think that this designing buildings to withstand floods, to withstand earthquakes or mudslides in Australia, and wildfires in Australia, we see a lot of research being done in this space, and I think that's going to be one of the key trends. And then I think also circular economy will continue to be a big trend. Designing for disassembly, using prefab in buildings, so that you don't have to. It's a little bit cookie cutter mentality that will come more into the building space, into the construction space, because we need to be able to then really salvage the materials, and designing from the very beginning with the disassembly mindset. It's going to be critical, and we won't see the benefits for a decade, but we have to start thinking of those things already today.
In order to be able to see it in 10 years of future.
Yeah, I think it's really an investment, right? And it's such a, if you have an architect starting a design today, the building won't be in existence for 5 years. So, you know, mm, construction product manufacturers like Dormakaba, we have to think already today on what's going to be the regulatory standard in 5 years, 10 years. We have to already be producing our products today for that future space.
Do you think AI and machine learning will play a role in the development? Or have you used AI at some part already?
I've seen a very interesting application of AI in architecture, and especially in the area of sustainability. So we discussed before the fact that you want to optimize the light also for the well-being of the people in the building. And usually you use softwares to modelize this. And it takes quite a lot of time and effort to prepare different scenery to check what is the optimal way to build a building so that the light comes in the best possible way. And now with artificial intelligence, we have seen that it is possible to generate a lot of different variations of. So you place some criteria in the system, and the machine is calculating what is the optimal answer for this building so that you have the best possible light in this building. So I really, and this is happening today. This is just one example of one application. So yeah, the tools change every day, change all the time, and I think this is very, very interesting, the way people use these tools, but in order to go and fulfill this vision, let's say.
When it comes to AI and machine learning, Stefanie and Lea, have you had any experiences with AI already in your daily work life when it comes to sustainable architecture?
I think I've seen some really good examples of architecture firms that are very progressive and quite advanced in it, but these are really the rare cases. I remember a few weeks ago, an architect was mentioning that if they have a bid to do for the German government, everything, all the plans, everything is still on paper. But the government is at the same time pressuring them to incorporate BIM and building information technology and AI, and kind of putting the burden on the architectures firms. But they themselves, as a government, are not able to even process digital information. So I think I would say that the building and construction industry is quite far behind on embracing AI and machine learning as opposed to other industries. I don't see that. I think it's coming. I think we use it in our daily work, but I think there's still quite a long way to go.
Okay. So one technology that is way more common are renewable energy systems. How do you think can they be integrated to contribute to sustainable building operations?
I think besides, nowadays a lot of people are making net zero carbon emission targets and making, with Fridays for Future and just the clear signs of the impact of climate change that we're seeing today. There's many architect firms and companies that have set net zero targets to be, basically emission neutral until 2050. So on the one hand, you will help to achieve those goals, also to achieve any kind of green building certification aims that you have. So, but of course, there's also, I think, other benefits. You increase the property value if you have your own power generation based on renewables. You have access to tax credits and better financing conditions and rebates from governments if you're installing solar panels or your own wind turbine. But it also gives you independence. You don't have to rely on external grids anymore. You can help ensure operation during power outages, and I think those kinds of things. If you have the right technology for the battery storage of the energy, then you know if you're a hospital, that's a real game changer in terms of patient care, being able to be self-sufficient and resilient in those kinds of situations. So it's about more than just driving down CO2 emissions and climate change. Of course, it's a great contributor, but it's also even helping to reduce smog in the micro climate that you happen to be in. So it's just so many benefits to promoting renewable energy systems to be really integrated as part of the building.
And do you think blockchain technology could offer some potential for sustainable building practices?
I've only ever really seen it in like pilots. I think when blockchain was first coming out, it was like, it's going to solve all our problems. And where I really do see potential is not necessarily in on the environmental side, but on the social side. I think one of the main issues that we have is in traceability of materials that can be critical. Like I know that in construction, there's maybe mining being used at some point in the value chain, and mining comes with all sorts of potential human rights impacts. And so, if a building owner really would like to know where exactly does that material come from that is embedded within the construction, it's very hard to do if you don't have something like blockchain. And I still see a lot of potential in the space to be able to really have a chain of custody for the materials, and to prove, for example, once and for all, whether or not a material is really free of modern slavery or free of child labor. So I think it's very exciting to kind of think of the potentials of blockchain in that term.
Ladies, looking even further into the future with all three of you, what future developments in the field of sustainable architecture do you wish to have with dormakaba?
We wish for a lot actually, but we we have to of course consider what the requirements are. And I think what Stephanie mentioned is actually a good transfer to that question, because it's about transparency. So it's getting more and more crucial and important, and that's also what we wish for, of course, transparency. Like, where are our products installed? Like, how long are they lasting in that building? How do we get it back? And what materials are used? So all these kind of questions, it's about transparency. So getting the data, having the data, and that's also getting in the direction of like digitalization, IoT, AI, whatsoever, and how to monitor the building. Like we have platforms like Stephanie mentioned, Concula, but also Madasta, for example, like tracking what materials in the different building products are used. How is the material passport of the building? When is it demolished? What materials can be reused? So it's really about the transparency of all the materials and everything which is used in the buildings.
And it's true, there's more and more the correlation between digitalization, BIM, and sustainable aspects, because BIM is a way to transfer the data and collaborate in a more and more digital way, and sustainability and traceability. So it is one of the contents. So of course, other contents are like technical informations, but sustainability data is more and more embedded, if I can say, in the BIM processes. And there is really the two aspects are very much, they go together really well.
Yeah. But of course, like if we move a step ahead, not only transparency, digitalization, and what Aurore just said, but also like innovative materials and design. So not only about like we were talking a lot about energy efficiency, for example, but also like how are the products designed? So for example, are they modular? Can they be like, can different parts be exchanged? Can they be repaired? Can they easily be exchanged, demolished, whatsoever? So this is also a big topic that currently comes up and going in hand with like what we've mentioned before, circular economy. So keeping the materials and also the products like in the loop with the different platforms, and where we need digitalization and maybe also blockchain to understand what we can do, which possibilities do we have, and how can we help to build more sustainable buildings in the future.
Stefanie, what would you wish for?
To be honest, I think Lea's ending comments were pretty spot on. So I'm not sure that I would add to that. I think it was really a round summary.
By the end of the episode, I always have a magic wand question. And of course, we will keep the tradition in this episode as well. Ladies, if you think of any building that either exists or has existed in the history of humanity, and you could have the chance to be part of the building process, but you could build it in a sustainable way, which building would you love to be a part of?
I know. I'm French, so I can say La Tour Eiffel. It would be so fun to be part, to do it again, but in a different way. Yeah, I think it would be such an amazing project. It's iconic, and I do believe it could be done in a more sustainable way, probably. Yeah, I think that would be really interesting, I believe.
For example, what would you do to make it more sustainable?
I don't know the details of the project, but probably the material, probably the I assume the impact with the industry, and so just bringing this project to life must have had quite an impact on the planet, I believe. So yeah, I do believe that it could be a different project, but still, of course, it's an iconic thing.
Absolutely. So Aurore would go with La Tour Eiffel, Le Tour Eiffel, right? The Eiffel Tower.
Yes.
Thank you. And Lea and Stefanie, what about you? What building would you love to be a part of in a sustainable way?
That's a really, really tough question. Maybe I don't have one particular, but as I'm coming from the Ruhr region, we have a lot of old factories. Like I like this charm of this industry style, and I know there needs to be done a lot of sustainable thinking of these kind of buildings to make them sustainable. And I really would love to combine this old charm of factories and industry style with sustainable thinking. And I think this would be really awesome to plan that. Yeah.
See, it wasn't that tough of a question. See, thank
That's
you.
true.
Yeah. And Stefanie, what about you? What building would you love to be a part of?
Personally, I've always been fascinated with the Taj Mahal. And this 400 plus year old and so beautiful, and also the story behind with the love story, I would say, is what it is. It's actually a beacon of love, and I think it's just quite very special, and I would have loved to be involved in the building of it. But I don't think I could have given them advice. I think the fact that this building has withstood the test of time for so long, I think I could have actually learned a lot from the construction on how to build sustainably.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, ladies, for being guests on today's episode. So I say thank you to Stephanie Ossenbach, to Lea Rammelmann, and Aurore Christolomme. Ladies, thank you very much.
Thanks, Wilma. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, and have a fantastic day. See you again in the next episode. Bye.
That was Because It Matters, a Dormakaba podcast. New episodes every month wherever you can listen to a podcast and on dormakaba.com.